How's it going, folks? My name's Scott. Welcome back to the channel once again. We're back with the Puma again today, and we're going to start rebuilding it. All the parts have arrived that we need. We still don't know if the chassis leg's bent, but we'll find that out really soon because we're going to start with refitting the crash bar now that it's been painted, and that should give us an indication whether it's bent or not. If it lines up perfectly, then great, we'll start putting the rest of the car back together and see how well we can line that up. If not, we're going to have to try and work out what to do, whether it has to go and be jigged or whatever. But hopefully not, hopefully it's perfectly straight. Took a few measurements off camera. It does look as though it's going to be okay. The arms are actually parallel with each other. They don't seem to be bent, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, here goes. First off though, just let me give a big shout out to Charles, Trent and Dorset who sent me this stuff. This is the auction that I showed in the last video. It came with pretty much everything I needed and more. There was more than advertised in the video, including some of the damaged wiring and also the airbox and everything needed, even though it wasn't mentioned in the listing. Although the delivery driver wasn't too impressed, as it had been booked out as a single pallet and took up way more room than he wanted it to. I stripped all the rad pack out of the crash bar to try the crash bar on, and it bolts up perfectly with 8 bolts, and to my relief all 8 bolts lined up perfectly in the original paint marks from the previous car, indicating to me that this car is, lucky for me, perfectly straight. Normally these crash bars are aluminium or aluminum if you're from across the pond, however this one is steel and a lot heavier, and I think that has probably absorbed most of the impact, actually minimising the damage to the front of the car. It also meant I needed help putting it on, as it was a bit awkward to do on my own. The bar also looks great in its new fresh coat of Rest Red paint. More on that later. I also then tried to slide the rad pack in from the top, but it was a quick learning curve that the crash bar was going to have to come back off in order to slip it in from behind. So it was quickly back off with the 8 bolts, and the rad packs bolted back onto the crash bar, and then the whole element refitted to the car once again. This was even heavier, and I held it in place while Sarah actually bolted it back to the car. Once again it lined up perfectly, and it felt like that was a large chunk of the rebuild completed in one go. Okay, so now that we know there's not actually any chassis damage to the car, we've got to start putting it back together. We've got to start with putting all the radiator back in, reconnecting all the hoses, getting everything all tightened up back there, making sure all the cables are back on, then we'll start putting panels back together. Now I'm refitting the hoses to the rad packs. There's 2 for the radiator that simply push on, and then spring type hose clamps hold them in place, and 2 hoses on the intercooler that are tightened on with Jubilee clips. Once these are on, I can then refit the aircon condenser pipes. These simply push into place, and 2 10mm nuts tighten them up. I then start to clip all the radiator cowlings back into place, and that means the car is then ready to start refitting the panels. Talking of panels, as I promised to mention before, the advert on eBay looked like the panels were race red in the pictures, but that must have been the lighting in the pictures. What arrived was very different, but no matter, as it was still the cheapest front end on eBay of any colour, and I actually ended up selling some of the parts I didn't need, getting me around £300 back again. The front wing goes back on with 7 10mm bolts, and we quickly find why the car was category S. The small bracket at the front of the wing that is welded to the inner wing is bent up slightly, but I think we can repair that rather than removing it and welding a new one on. As overall it doesn't look too bad, and it is just bent on one of the angled bits anyway and not deformed too much. I also should say that to my surprise every single nut and bolt from the other car parts that I bought was also in a bag in the box as well, so I'm not short on fixings for putting it back together. And as you see, there's where the vehicle is actually category S. This welded on bracket is actually bent up. It's about just under an inch out, so we'll be able to pull that back down, get it back in place. Back. There we go, one front wing refitted, obviously the wrong colour, but look at the panel gaps are spot on, really sitting quite well, especially up there, all the way down. We'll start putting the rest of it back together. I really should replace the bonnet hinges, but looking at the bonnet hinges, they're absolutely solid. I'm not going to bother, I'm going to try and get away with not replacing them. I do have spare ones if need be, but we'll try first not doing it. So it's back on with the bonnet, and that's just 4 nuts, and I fit them with paint marks on the original hinges just to see how it lines up. And this bonnet was so much lighter than the one on the 1 series, so it was easy enough to do this one on my own. Okay, and first fit, a little bit small gap there, so we'll have to see what we can do there. Gap on that side is a little bit big, but I do think the inner wings maybe bent up a little bit, so we'll bend that back down and see what happens. With a little push down of the front wing, it actually pops back into place pretty easily, and then after just a few minutes of minor adjustments of the bonnet hinges, I think we're starting to get somewhere, and luckily my decision to not change the hinges has worked again, although I do have a spare set if I need them later on. I am just gutted though that the colour wasn't quite right, as the panels that have arrived are all in good condition, barring what could have been a paintless dent repair on the bonnet, and the car might have got away with a quick blend at the body shop. I can see how this job could take hours upon hours to do the alignment, but I think I've been pretty lucky so far, although I will ensure that everything is absolutely perfect once I'm rebuilding it after it's been stripped back down and painted again. Okay, so it looks as though we've been really lucky with the bonnet hinges. The bonnet hinges don't appear to be damaged. The bonnet is absolutely lining up perfect now. That was really quick. It's almost on the marks it was for whatever car it came off. So we'll continue and start putting the bumper back on now. I can now remove the broken and then refit the plastic bumper to wing brackets. These clip into the bottom of the wing with no adjustment, so there's no alignment on these, and they then secure on with 3 8mm head screws. Then it's the same on the passenger side, and once again this bracket is straightened perfectly and the plastic fixing fits in perfectly. And the complete front bumper then clips on at each side into the mounts onto the wing, and once again there is no adjustment there, so it sits perfectly against the wing, and the only adjustment needed is along the top to align it with the bonnet. The bumper is then secured on at the top with 4 10mm head bolts, and with some clips at the bottom that secure it to the under tray, but I will do those ones later, as I will be replacing the broken tray even though it only has a small crack in it. There is a new one supplied, so I might as well fit it. Front arch trim clips back into the bumper, completing that side, bar a few clips in the arch liner, but again there's a lot of them supplied in the bag that came with the car parts. And last but not least for the bodywork, it's on to the headlights. These are held in with just 3 Torx screws, T27s, and there isn't a lot of adjustment in them, so they fit relatively easy, if not a little awkward just to get in there in the first place. It's nice to see the car coming back together this quickly, but remember I still have to strip it all down again to repair the broken wiring, to clear the faults on the dashboard, and also to check for crash data, just to ensure nothing is retained in the ECU. Remember, there was no airbags deployed in this car, but I can't say for sure if any seatbelt pyro deployed or anything until I check. However, we will check all that in the next video.